I'm Margaret Collins, 38 years old, and if someone had told me a few years ago that my sister would one day look me in the eye surrounded by our parents, our neighbors and friends, and call me a burden, I would have laughed in disbelief. I would have said, "Not Rebecca, not my little sister. She may have her moods, but she'd never do that to me." But that's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't come from your enemies. It comes from those who know exactly where to stab so that it hurts the most. It happened on a night that should have been filled with warmth and celebration, our parents' 40th wedding anniversary. We were gathered in their old house in Austin, Texas, the home I had sacrificed nearly everything to protect. I remember the smell of roast beef wafting from the kitchen, the soft buzz of conversation, the clinking of wine glasses. I had spent hours perfecting a rose petal cake, something I'd learned back when I owned my flower shop. Each swirl of pink frosting was meant as a tribute to Mom and Dad, a gesture of love for all they'd been through together. The dining room was full family, neighbors, friends. Laughter rippled across the table as I set the cake down, glowing with pride. And then, like a storm breaking through a sunny sky, Rebecca leaned back in her chair, her voice slicing through the noise. "Margaret, you're holding us back," she said, her tone sharp, her eyes cold. "We want to live without you." For a moment I thought I'd misheard. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and unmovable. My chest tightened, heat rising in my face, but I forced a smile, lifting my wineglass with a trembling hand. The bitterness of the drink matched the sting in my chest. What shattered me wasn't just her cruelty, it was the silence that followed. Dad, seated at the head of the table, simply sipped his wine as if she'd mentioned the weather. Mom froze with her fork halfway to her lips but said nothing. The neighbors glanced around uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Nobody defended me. Not my parents, not the people I'd bled for, not even the ones who knew how much I'd already given up. I stood calm and deliberate, every step measured. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I went upstairs, packed a small suitcase, just clothes, a few photographs, my laptop, and slipped out the back door into the cool Texas night. The voices and laughter faded behind me, replaced by the steady hum of my car engine as I drove to a cheap motel 10 miles away. I didn't look back. In that dim motel room with its scratchy sheets and buzzing air conditioner, I lay staring at the ceiling. My phone vibrated again and again on the nightstand with unread messages. Rebecca's name flashing, then Mom's, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Their voices were the last thing I wanted to hear. All I could think about were the sacrifices I had made, the years I had spent keeping them afloat, and the way they had just erased me in one cruel moment. 5 years earlier, I had been the proud owner of Petals and Stems, a small flower shop in downtown Austin. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Brides came to me for bouquets, nervous and glowing. Families stopped in for arrangements to celebrate birthdays, graduations, even funerals. I stayed up late, my hands pricked by thorns, my clothes dusted with pollen, and I loved every second of it. The shop was my dream, the fruit of years of saving and planning. And then the call came. Dad's voice had been heavy that night. Their house, the same one we were celebrating in, was drowning in debt. Medical bills from Mom's surgery, a second mortgage, repairs they couldn't afford. They were on the verge of losing it all. I didn't hesitate. Without thinking twice, I sold my shop for $150,000. It was enough to wipe out their debts, fix the leaking roof, and keep the lights on. I moved back into my childhood bedroom thinking it was just temporary until things got better. But temporary turned into 5 years. 5 years of me paying the bills, electricity, water, internet, even property taxes, nearly $2,000 a month siphoned straight from my account. I took a job at a local nursery, making half of what I'd earned at my shop just to keep money flowing. Dad would nod his thanks. Mom would hug me. But Rebecca, she treated me like an intruder. The sister who once trailed behind me as a child begging to help arrange flowers now rolled her eyes when I entered the kitchen. She muttered about how I took up space. Once she snapped at me over a coffee mug left in the sink, hissing, "You don't even belong here." I brushed it off at first. She was stressed, I told myself. Her job at the boutique barely paid, and she was always chasing freelance gigs online. But the comments piled up, each one sharper than the last. She'd blast music to drown me out, leave passive-aggressive notes about chores, complain to Mom that I was mooching as if I wasn't the one paying the bills. Still, I swallowed it. I woke up early, slipped out for coffee before anyone stirred, walked along Town Lake for hours just to give them space. I ate dinners alone in my room, scrolling through old photos of my flower shop, missing the scent of lilies and roses, longing for the days when my life was my own. Through it all, Mom and Dad stayed blind. Dad tinkered in the garage, fixing neighbors' lawnmowers for pocket change. Mom chattered about roses with her gardening club friends. They leaned on me, yes, but they never asked how I was holding up. And when Rebecca's words cut through the anniversary dinner, they didn't stop her. They let her speak for all of them. That was the moment something inside me broke. I realized I had been carrying their weight for so long that they had forgotten it even had mass. They had built their lives on my sacrifices and I had disappeared beneath them. Lying in that motel bed, I thought back to Edward Hayes, an old acquaintance of mine from years ago. He had a daughter who lived rent-free in a house he paid for a daughter who accused him of dragging her down, even as he funded her car, her utilities, even daycare for her child. One day after she told him to leave her alone, he simply stopped paying. Within weeks, her world collapsed. Edward never went back. Edward never... I realized I was standing at that same crossroads. I could keep bleeding for a family who thought of me as a burden, or I could finally let them feel the weight they had placed on my shoulders. So I opened my laptop. My bank account glowed back at me with rows of automatic payments: $300 for electricity, $100 for water, $80 for internet, $400 for insurance, small repair subscriptions fees, nearly $2,000 draining away every month. My chest tightened, but my hands were steady as I moved through the settings. One by one, I clicked cancel. Electricity gone, water gone, internet cut, insurance terminated. Each click felt like cutting a rope that had bound me for years. Not revenge, at least not at first. Clarity, liberation. They wanted to live without me, so be it. I closed the laptop and exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. 3 days later, the cracks began to show. Rebecca called, her voice sharp with panic. The internet was out, she said. She couldn't submit her freelance jobs. The electricity was failing, water shut-off notices piling up. Mom's voice echoed in the background, frantic. "Turn it back on," Rebecca demanded. Not a thank you, not an apology, just orders, like I was still the unpaid manager of their lives. But this time I didn't bend. I reminded her of her words at the dinner table. "You said you wanted to live without me. This is what it looks like." She snapped back, calling me dramatic, sensitive, unwanted. Then she hung up. For the first time, I didn't cry. My hands were steady. My heart was racing, yes, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was resolve. They were about to feel the consequences of what they'd said. And this time, I wasn't going to save them. The calls came every night after that like clockwork. First from my sister, then from my mother, sometimes both together, voices overlapping in anger and panic. I'd watch the phone light up in the dark motel room, their names flashing one after the other, and I'd let it ring until the buzzing stopped. By the end of the week, Rebecca's messages had shifted from fury to desperation. Her first voicemail was venomous. "You're pathetic, Margaret. You think cutting the bills makes you strong? It just proves you were never needed." But by the fifth message, her voice cracked. "I can't work without the internet, Margaret. I'm going to lose my clients. Please, I need it." I would sit there listening, my chest tight, my thumb hovering over the delete button. A part of me wanted to give in, to restore it all, and pretend her words at dinner had never been spoken. But the larger part of me, the one that had been suffocating for years under their dependence, reminded me that this was exactly what they asked for. "We want to live without you." So I let them. 2 weeks after the dinner, their house began to dim, literally. Neighbors called me quietly, whispering their observations. Porch lights flickered out. The lawn grew wild, and Rebecca could be seen pacing outside with her phone held high, hunting for a signal. Mom stood in the driveway one morning, arguing with a utility worker who arrived to disconnect the last of their services. Word spread quickly in our neighborhood, and with it came the sharp sting of gossip. I knew how this community worked. They had always admired my parents, respected my father's quiet dignity, my mother's presence in church groups. But admiration is fragile. It cracks when bills go unpaid, when whispers of mismanagement and shame creep into conversations at grocery stores and coffee shops. I imagined the looks they received at Sunday service, the forced smiles, the murmurs behind cupped hands. Part of me pitied them. Another part thought, now you know how it feels to be humiliated in front of everyone. Still, guilt wasn't something I could shut off like water or internet. It haunted me in the quiet hours. At night, lying awake in the motel's scratchy sheets, I would wonder if I had gone too far. They were still my parents. Rebecca was still my sister. I remembered the afternoons when Mom braided my hair as a girl the way Rebecca used to sneak into my bed during thunderstorms. The warmth of those memories made my chest ache because they clashed violently with the silence of the anniversary dinner, the silence that had branded me as disposable. I told myself this wasn't revenge, it was justice. They wanted life without me. I was only giving them what they demanded, but even justice weighs heavy when it's your own blood on the scale. The third week, Dad called. His number flashed across my screen late one night and something in me softened. Unlike the others, he hadn't left a single message before. He had stayed silent, watching from the shadows like he always did. When I answered, his voice was tired, older than I remembered. "Margaret," he said quietly, "your mother and sister are falling apart." I swallowed hard, my throat thick. "And you?" There was a pause. "I'm holding on. But it's bad, sweetheart. The house is dark, the fridge is empty. Your mother doesn't know what to do. Rebecca, she's drowning." My chest burned, but I forced my voice to stay steady. "She told me I was a burden, Dad, in front of everyone, and you didn't say a word." He sighed, and the weight in that breath told me he had replayed that night as many times as I had. I was ashamed, he admitted. Not of you, of us, of what we let happen. You gave up everything for this family, and we let your sister treat you like nothing. I should have spoken. I should have defended you. Tears slipped down my cheeks. For so long I had wanted to hear those words. Yet instead of relief, I felt anger rise. Where had this clarity been when I needed it most? Why now, when the damage was already done? "I can't go back, Dad," I whispered. "Not after everything." "I'm not asking you to," he said softly. "I just needed you to know I see you now. I see what you've done for us, and I'm sorry." His apology lodged in my chest like a thorn. It wasn't enough to erase the years of silence, but it pierced through the loneliness I had been carrying. The following month, I decided to drive past the house. Not to go inside, not to speak, but just to see. The sight startled me. The once proud home with its manicured lawn and glowing windows looked abandoned. Grass reached past my ankles, windows sagged with grime, and the porch swing where Rebecca and I used to sit as children creaked in the wind. Through the blinds, I glimpsed shadows moving slowly. Mom slumped in a chair, Rebecca curled on the couch, both lit only by the weak glow of a battery-powered lantern. My stomach twisted. I wanted to storm inside, flip on the lights, and remind them what life had been before they pushed me away. But then I remembered that night, Rebecca's sharp voice, my mother's silence, the way the room had turned against me. And I stayed in the car engine, humming, tears streaking my face, until I finally drove away. That night, I dreamed of my flower shop. I saw myself surrounded by lilies and roses, the air heavy with the scent of new beginnings. Customers smiled, thanked me, left with arms full of blossoms. In the dream, I wasn't a burden. I was needed, valued. I woke with a sudden clarity. I had been pouring my soul into saving a family that didn't want me. But maybe it was time to pour it back into myself. I used the savings I still had, modest, but enough to start sketching out a plan. Not a full flower shop yet, but a small online boutique selling arrangements through social media. I rented a storage unit and transformed it with tables, coolers, vases. The work was grueling, but it gave me purpose again. For the first time in years, my energy wasn't drained by keeping others afloat. It was building something of my own. Orders trickled in at first. A bouquet for a birthday, roses for an anniversary, wildflowers for a funeral. Each one reminded me of who I used to be before I gave everything away. And slowly I began to feel alive again. Meanwhile, the calls from home grew fewer. Rebecca's anger had burned itself out, replaced by silence. Mom no longer begged. Even Dad's voice grew more resigned. It was as if the family I had once broken myself to protect had finally accepted life without me. The strangest part, the more they let go, the lighter I felt. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. Families don't break quietly. There's always another twist waiting buried like a landmine beneath the surface. And when it exploded, it would change everything again. When I think back to that time, I realize how quickly my life began to split into two distinct paths: the one I had left behind with my family, and the one I was finally carving out for myself. For years, everything about me had been swallowed up by their needs: the bills I paid, the sacrifices I made, the dreams I buried. But once I canceled those payments and began my own small business again, it felt like a part of me I thought was gone had quietly returned. At first, the orders were small. A young man messaged me asking for a bouquet for his girlfriend's birthday. A grieving woman wanted a spray of lilies for her husband's funeral. I worked alone in the little storage unit I had turned into my studio, arranging flowers under dim lights, fingers raw from thorns and stems. It wasn't glamorous, but when I sealed those boxes and delivered them myself, I felt something I hadn't in years: purpose. Word spread faster than I expected. Soon I had repeat customers, then referrals, then larger orders. A local wedding planner stumbled upon my work and asked if I could handle centerpieces for an intimate ceremony. I said yes, though my hands shook the whole time. When the bride later hugged me and whispered, "You made my day perfect," I cried in my car for 10 minutes before I could even drive home. For the first time in so long, my tears weren't from pain. They were from joy, from remembering who I was when I wasn't just a burden carrying everyone else's weight. Meanwhile, my family's world was unraveling. The house I had once poured my savings into grew darker by the week. Without me paying the bills, the utilities stayed cut off. Rebecca's freelance work dried up without internet, and Mom's friends from church began to distance themselves. Neighbors who once admired our family started whispering behind closed doors, shaking their heads at the state of the property. I heard from Dad occasionally, his voice quieter each time. "It's hard, Margaret," he said once, the sound of wind whistling through the phone. "Your mother doesn't know how to cope. Rebecca. She's angry all the time. They don't understand how much you did for us until now." His words hurt and soothed me all at once. Part of me wanted to scream at him, "Why didn't you say that when I was under the same roof? Why did you wait until my absence to finally see me?" But another part of me, the daughter still aching for her father's approval, clung to those words like a lifeline. Then came the night when the past and present collided in the most unexpected way. I was arranging peonies late in the unit when my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something compelled me to answer. "Margaret." The voice was hoarse, trembling. It was Rebecca. I froze, petals falling from my hand. "What do you want?" She let out a shuddering breath. I can't do this anymore. The lights, the cold, the food stamps. Mom blames me for everything. She says if I hadn't opened my mouth that night, you'd still be here. Dad barely looks at us. I'm falling apart." Her words tumbled out in gasps, like she was choking on the truth. And for the first time, I heard my sister not as the arrogant girl who had mocked me at dinner, but as someone stripped bare by her own choices. But before pity could fully settle in, my anger sparked. "You told me I was a burden, Rebecca, in front of everyone. You wanted life without me, and now you have it." There was silence on the other end, then a sob. "I didn't mean it. I was jealous. You always did everything for them, and I felt invisible. I thought if I pushed you away, maybe I'd matter more." Her confession stung like salt on an open wound. Jealousy. That was the root of it all. I gave up my business, my independence, my savings, everything to keep our family afloat, and still she envied me. I ended the call without saying goodbye. My hands trembled as I put the phone down, because even if her words were true, they didn't erase the way she had broken me. Weeks later, another crack split the facade. This time it wasn't Rebecca who reached out, it was Mom. She showed up at my storage unit unannounced one morning. I'll never forget the sight: her once pristine hair now streaked with gray, her coat hanging loosely, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. She stood in the doorway, clutching her purse like a lifeline. "Margaret," she whispered, "we need your help." The words twisted in my chest. For years she had stood by Rebecca's side, her silence cutting deeper than any insult, and now she came to me, voice small, asking for rescue. I set down my scissors, steadying my breath. Why now, Mom? Why not that night? Why didn't you defend me when your other daughter called me a burden? Her face crumpled. I was wrong. I thought keeping peace meant staying quiet. But silence was its own betrayal. I see that now. For a fleeting moment, I saw the mother who used to hum lullabies as she tucked me in, who kissed my scraped knees, who taught me how to braid roses into crowns, and I wanted to fall into her arms to forget everything. But then I remembered the cold eyes across the dinner table, the weight of her refusal to speak when I needed her most. I can't save you anymore, I told her. Not this time. Her lips trembled, and tears slid down her face. She left without another word, the scent of her faded perfume lingering in the doorway long after she was gone. As my business grew, so did the distance between us. A local lifestyle magazine featured me in an article titled, "The Woman Who Brought Flowers Back to Austin." Customers doubled, then tripled. I hired 2 assistants, rented a proper storefront, and for the first time since I sold my old shop, I felt like myself again. But success didn't erase the wounds, it magnified them. Because every step forward reminded me of what I had lost, that I had rebuilt my life not with my family at my side, but in the ruins they left behind. And yet karma has a way of working quietly, creeping up when you least expect it. One evening, Dad called again. His voice was heavy. "Your mother and sister, they're leaving. They can't keep the house anymore. It's going to foreclosure." The words hit me like a stone to the chest. That house had been my childhood, my sacrifices, my blood and sweat. I had saved it once, only to watch it slip away now. I drove past it a week later. The lawn was wild, a foreclosure notice taped to the door. The porch swing creaked in the wind, abandoned. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel sorrow as I looked at it. I felt release. Because the truth was clear, the house had never been my home. My home was wherever I chose to build my life. And this time I was building it for me. Still, a part of me knew the story wasn't finished. Secrets lingered in the shadows of our family, things left unsaid. And when they surfaced, they would either destroy what little remained or finally set me free. The foreclosure of my parents' house should have been the ending. It felt like the closing of a long, painful chapter. I remember parking across the street one last time, staring at the notice plastered to the front door, the once proud Collins home, now reduced to silence and shame. For years I had poured my savings into those walls, sacrificed my dreams to keep them standing, only to watch them crumble after I walked away. I thought that was it, the final consequence of their betrayal. But life has a cruel way of holding back one last twist, the one that rips open wounds you thought had already scarred. It came one evening when Dad asked me to meet him at a diner on the edge of town. He looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders hunched, eyes tired. He pushed a manila folder across the table. "I need you to see this," he said quietly. Inside were documents, bank statements, loan papers, credit card bills. My breath caught as I scanned the numbers. Tens of thousands of dollars withdrawn over years. And my name. My name was listed on accounts I had never opened. I looked up at him, my pulse racing. "What is this?" His face tightened. "Your mother and Rebecca. They forged your signature. They used your name to take out loans. Some of the money they paid back, some they didn't." The room spun. Betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial, legal. While I had been bleeding myself dry to save them, they had been siphoning from me in ways I hadn't even known. "Why didn't you stop them?" My voice cracked sharp with rage, his eyes filled with shame. "Because I was weak. Because every time I tried, your mother said it was temporary, that you'd understand that family sticks together. And I let her convince me." The fury that rose in me was unlike anything I had ever felt. I had given up my flower shop, my independence, my peace, and still they had stolen more, hiding behind my name. I left the diner shaking, the folder clutched in my hands, like proof of everything I had suspected, but never dared to believe. That night in my apartment above my little shop, I spread the papers across the floor. Every forged signature, every stolen cent, every receipt that screamed their deception. And I cried, not soft tears, but gut-wrenching sobs that tore through me until I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just the money. It was the realization that the people who were supposed to love me most had seen me not as a daughter, not as a sister, but as a resource, a bank account, a safety net. I swore in that moment I would never forgive them, not this time. The next day, Rebecca showed up at my shop. She looked different, hollow-eyed, her once glossy hair limp, her clothes wrinkled. She stood in the doorway, clutching her coat around her, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her shoulders. "I know you found out," she whispered. I didn't answer. I kept trimming roses, the snip of the scissors cutting through the silence. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "It was Mom's idea. She said you'd forgive us, that you always did. I wanted to believe her." I slammed the scissors down, my anger boiling over. "You forged my name, Rebecca. You stole from me. And then you had the audacity to stand in front of everyone and call me a burden. Do you even realize what you've done?" Tears streamed down her face, but I felt nothing but rage. "You think you lost a house," I spat. "But I lost years of my life, my business, my peace, and for what? So you could play the victim while bleeding me dry." She collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "I was jealous, Margaret. Always jealous. You were the one who built something. You were the one Dad trusted. And I hated it. I thought if I took what was yours, maybe I'd finally feel like I mattered." Her words, broken and desperate, should have softened me. But all they did was confirm the truth. Her betrayal wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. "Get out," I told her. "You and Mom made your choice. Now you live with it." She tried to reach for me, but I turned away, my heart hard as stone. Weeks passed. The foreclosure went through, and Mom and Rebecca moved into a dingy apartment across town. Rumors spread through the neighborhood, whispers of forgery and fraud, their reputations shredded. Dad, though still tied to them by marriage, spent more time with me, his shame etched into every line of his face. One night, as we closed up the shop together, he said, "You've built something beautiful, Margaret. Don't let their mistakes take that away from you." I wanted to believe him, but the truth was, the scars ran deep. I lay awake most nights replaying everything: the dinner, the silence, the foreclosure, the folder of forged papers. Betrayal doesn't just leave scars, it reshapes who you are. The climax came on a cold winter evening when I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name scrawled across the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," it read in my mother's handwriting. "But I need you to know I never saw you as a burden. I saw you as our salvation. And that was my mistake. I let myself believe you'd carry us forever. I was wrong. I'm sorry." I stared at those words for a long time, my chest tight, tears blurring the ink. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was the first time my mother had admitted the truth. I folded the letter and tucked it into the manila folder with the forged papers. Proof of betrayal, yes, but also proof of acknowledgement. That winter, my shop flourished. Brides booked me months in advance. Magazines wrote about my comeback story. Customers returned again and again, not just for the flowers, but for the way I poured my soul into every arrangement. And slowly I began to realize something. My revenge hadn't been in cutting off the bills, or in exposing the forgery, or even in watching them lose the house. My true revenge was in this: I survived. I rebuilt. I thrived in spite of them. Because in the end, they had wanted me gone. And by walking away, I had proven that I didn't need them. They needed me. That was the deepest cut of all. I used to believe endings were loud doors, slamming voices, raised dramatic goodbyes that echoed through a house. But what I learned is that the real endings, the ones that change you forever, are quiet. They creep in during the silence, after the shouting, when the house is empty, and you finally realize you're the only one left standing. By the time the foreclosure was finalized, my mother and sister were gone from the neighborhood, tucked away in a rundown apartment on the other side of town. I didn't go to see it. I didn't need to. Their lives had already crumbled the way mine once had, except now they were the ones trapped in the darkness they had wished on me. Karma doesn't always arrive on schedule, but it always collects its debt. Dad drifted between their world and mine. He still loved Mom. I could see it in the way his eyes dimmed when he spoke of her. But he spent more time with me now, as if he was trying to reclaim something he'd allowed to slip away for too long. Sometimes we'd sit together in my flower shop after closing, the air heavy with the perfume of roses and eucalyptus, and he'd say things I had waited my whole life to hear. "You always carried more than your share, Margaret," he told me once, his voice thick with regret. "I see that now. I just wish I'd told you sooner." I smiled, but there was no triumph in it, only sadness. "I wanted you to defend me that night, Dad, just once. I wanted you to say I wasn't a burden." His eyes filled, and he nodded slowly. "You were never a burden. We were. And I'll spend the rest of my days regretting that I let you believe otherwise." Those words didn't erase the years of silence, but they offered a kind of fragile peace, a recognition. And maybe that was all I could hope for. The shop grew beyond anything I could have imagined. What started in a storage unit blossomed into a full storefront, then a second location across town. Brides competed for my calendar companies, ordered arrangements for galas, and even the mayor's office placed an order once. Each arrangement I crafted carried a piece of my story flowers born out of pain, yet arranged with love. Customers told me they felt something different in my work, as if the flowers themselves whispered resilience. But with success came reminders. Every bouquet I tied made me think of what I had given up to be here, my shop years ago. My savings, my family. And yet maybe those sacrifices had been the soil. Maybe everything had to die before something stronger could grow. I still saw Mom and Rebecca occasionally. Small-town gossip ensured that. Once at the grocery store, I turned the corner and nearly collided with Rebecca. She looked older, worn down by the grind of survival. For a brief moment our eyes met, hers filled with shame, mine with something more complicated. We didn't speak. She turned away, clutching her basket tighter, and I let her go. Because some wounds are too deep to stitch shut. Some silences are louder than words. The biggest surprise came months later when I received a letter from an attorney. At first, my stomach clenched, expecting another twist of betrayal. But when I opened it, I discovered Dad had quietly amended his will. Everything, his savings, his pension, even the few tools from his garage he loved so much, was left to me. In the letter, he had scrawled one final line in his own hand for the daughter who carried us all. "I should have given you flowers long before you ever sold your own." I pressed that note to my chest and cried until the ink blurred. Because for all the pain, all the silence, those words mattered. They were too late to heal everything, but they were proof I hadn't been invisible after all. And so here I am, 38 years old, standing in a shop filled with blooms that smell of fresh starts. People ask me sometimes if I regret walking away from my family. If I regret cutting the ties that once bound me so tightly I could barely breathe. The truth, I regret the years I lost to their weight. I regret silencing my own needs in the name of loyalty. But I don't regret the night I chose myself. Because in that choice, I finally understood something no betrayal could take from me. I am not a burden. I never was. What they called weakness in me was sacrifice. What they mocked as failure was resilience. And what they tried to break in me only made me bloom stronger. If there's one lesson my story carries, it's this: family is not defined by blood, but by love and respect. And if the people you sacrifice for cannot honor that, then you are allowed, no, you are obligated to choose yourself. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is not anger, not punishment, not even justice. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply surviving, thriving, living so fully that the ones who cast you aside have no choice but to watch from the shadows as you bloom without them. If my story touched you, if you've ever carried a weight that wasn't yours, I hope you find the courage to let it go. And if you've ever felt like a burden in your own family, please know this: you are not. Your worth is not measured by what others take from you, but by the life you create when you finally stand tall. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like mine. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below about a time you chose yourself over someone else's expectations. Because in the end, that choice might just save your life.